Hi, I'm just trying this out, so it looks like I'm just going to wait a minute for people to come in. It looks like people are coming in. Can you let me know if you can hear me? If someone can just say something in the chat, that would be great. I'll make sure that it's enabled if it's not. Oh, perfect. Hello. Hi, can you hear me? Oh, thank you, Cami. Awesome. This is still new to me. I was trying to use the new version of the live stream, but I couldn't figure it out, so I went back to the old one. So, oh, hey, Stacy, hey, Thomas. Hey, John. I was going to say, I don't actually know everyone. And hey, Gurish Gowdy. I don't know if I've actually chatted with you before. But if you didn't hear, my plan for today is to talk about my mid-year goals and kind of my reading so far. You can probably hear the little guy chattering in the background. If you're wondering why I'm looking down, it's because he's down there. I want to keep him off camera, but waiting for him to have a nap is like impossible. So either this live stream would be 10 minutes long because he naps like nobody's business. And by that, I mean he doesn't nap at all. Or this is the only way to do it. So, yeah, thank you. I got a snowball mic from my days of podcasting with Stephanie. I definitely miss the Books in the Freezer podcast, although there is something coming for that for those of you that listen to the podcast. I am possibly making a guest appearance for a bonus episode, so stay tuned for that. But basically, if you watched my end of the year videos, I announced that I was pregnant and said that my goal for the year was to just read whatever I want. I didn't want to do any goals in terms of reading. But then I watched everyone's best of the year videos. And of course, with that, I suddenly wanted to make goals. And so even though I thought this year would be crazy, I did make 5 goals for myself. And so I kind of wanted to go through them today because I've never actually announced it on camera to any video or whatnot. I talked about it on Twitter a little bit and I wanted to see how I was doing. So I ran my stats today. I didn't actually know about some of these stats, how I was doing until now. So I thought that would be fun. Oh, hey, Holly, thanks for popping in. Hey, Mitchell. There's so many people coming. I'm happy. I was really worried. There's nothing worse. You start the live chat and it says like 0 participants and you just sit there and wait. And you're like, I hope I'm not going to be talking to no one because that's really awkward. So I'm just going to run through my stats. I got my phone here because, I have like the memory of a 2-year-old or a goldfish. I don't know, whoever has short memories. Hey, Sean. It's awesome to see all the people popping in. So first off, my goals for Goodreads, I think people heard about this before, was to read 50 books before the end of the year. And if anyone's watching my Goodreads, I'm actually up to 125. It says I'm a little bit lower because I haven't reviewed a few books, but yeah, I have 125 books read already and we're just at the end of June. So I've more than surpassed it. I've doubled and then some what I plan to read. And my reading has slowed down for this last part of the year. I know I'm not going to be reading as much, but clearly that wasn't a problem. So that's good. I'm considering that one done. My next goal was to reread 7 books because, and I think a lot of booktubers can relate to this, you kind of have pressure to always be reading new books because if you're reading old books, you're basically recycling your old content. So if I talk to you again about I'm thinking of ending things, you're like, yeah, you've read that already. You told us about it. Like read something new and give us new recommendations. And I know like people aren't judgy, but it's good to see. Hey everyone. And so it's really good to see that, people don't mind that you reread, but I kind of wanted to actually give myself a goal to reread. So I said I wanted to reread 7 books and I've so far reread 10 books. So again, surpassed that goal. And the biggest reason for that is I reread typically in 2 situations. I reread when I'm stressed. So when I spent that week in the hospital waiting, basically went into labor or whatever, blah, blah, I keep saying it like 11 weeks early, I was so stressed. So all I wanted to do was reread my favorite books. So I did that. And then the other time I reread is when my brain is just too tired to comprehend a new book. And so it's a lot easier to kind of revisit a favorite when, even if you don't have the book, like even if you're not fully paying attention to a book, you can still know the general gist of what's happening because you've read it before. And so I was kind of sleep deprived for a while. I still kind of am, but I'm coping better, right? Let's say, you'll learn to get used to like 4 or 5 hours of sleep or whatever. So that basically I did a lot of rereading for the last couple months. So because of that, that's why that goal is done. And then I kind of get into my interesting goals. So one thing that I've really wanted to focus on more is to read diversely. Hang on one second. I just got to reposition my child. No, he's good. So one of the things I wanted to do was to read more diversely. And so I set a percentage goal for myself to read 30% by, what did I say? I said read at least 30% books with predominant diverse themes, with the majority of those being own voices authors. I haven't tracked specifically, but I'd say most of the books that I've read that are diverse, I purposely basically looked for authors that fit within, the diversity area that they were representing. So I think I did pretty good in terms of own voices, but I had no idea where I was sitting in terms of the actual percentage. And I thought I had really bombed it, honestly, because I stopped paying attention. It was important to me for the first couple of weeks of the year. And not that it wasn't, but I just got really distracted. And Wally mentioned I reread 10 books. I'm pretty sure all 10 of the books I reread were not diverse, because if I look back at my favorites from, 7 years ago, I didn't really think about those things. Oh, thanks, Holly. Apparently I'm crushing this year. I'm trying. It's a work in progress. And I apologize. The lighting is not great here. If you ever wonder why I film where I film, it's because it's the only place in my house with decent lights. And I know people say that you just use like a lamp to film, but like I've tried filming under lamps and I look scary like this. Like no one wants to watch this if it wasn't a live screen. You kind of get away with, I feel like live streams, you can kind of get away with kind of bad quality, at least for my first one. Like that's allowed, right? And before people go, for those that listened to my impromptu live stream, which I did not post online because it was such a hot mess, but I know there's quite a few people that came back for that. I want to say that we were discussing Lovecraft and we all discovered that I didn't know how to pronounce this book title. So I've been practicing online. Laura has been coaching me, and I believe it is The Call of Cthulhu. Can someone say, did I get that right? Did I get that right? Cthulhu? Because we were all like laughing our heads off. Oh, and apparently Holly uses LED lights. And Sean says, I'm good. Thomas says, well done. So I can go home now. Like basically we can end the live stream because I can now say Cthulhu. Oh my goodness. So what I was going to say, going back to that, is I had no idea where I was going in terms of diversity because, like I said, it just really fell off my radar. And when it comes to comfort reads and rereading, I just was reading whatever came up. And like I said, I knew I was reading a lot of like white, cis, heterosexual authors, etc. But I actually did really well. So of the 125 books I read this year, hang on, I crunched the numbers earlier today, 44 were diverse, or I think it was either 44 or 45, but the percentage ended up being 36%, which is more than 30%. So I was really happy about that. I'm almost still tempted to change from a percentage, though, to an actual number of books, because my only complaint with these kind of goals, and I'd like to know from other booktubers on here who do like goals, is the problem with percentage goals is that it almost discourages you from reading certain books that are going to ruin your stats, as opposed to what I wanted this goal to do was to encourage me to seek out and read those diverse books. Because especially when it comes to horror, which I'll get to in a second, I really want to be bringing those underrepresented books to the forefront. But my problem is that I started reading, as I've mentioned before, some Stephen King this year, and he doesn't really help my diversity stats. So I found myself wanting to pick up a Stephen King audiobook the other day, but I thought, no, it's going to wreck my percentage. And that's kind of a problem for me. So I might switch it up and just put a number and try to predict roughly how many more books. So if I've read like 44 diverse books so far this year, maybe say I want to get to like 75 diverse books by the end of the year. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of. And yeah, it sounds like Cami, you said you don't use percentages, only whole numbers. So maybe that's, a similar issue to kind of run into. So maybe I'm not the only one. And so then I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that because, like I said, horror is kind of my niche. It's kind of, I like to think it's what I'm known for online, or at least the nice thing I'm known for online. Who knows what else people say about me? But I really wanted to make sure that if I'm going to be recommending horror, like people I have heard like say, I come to your channel for the horror recommendation. Well, I don't just want to be recommending Stephen King, things like that. Like he's easy to find. I really wanted to go and find horror that was diverse. And I should mention, everyone has different representations of what they mean by diversity. For myself, it would be an author who's a person of color. So whether they be, African descent or Asian descent, etc., or someone international. And that's kind of a bit looser. I don't consider an international if they're from the UK. So typically I'd say someone is internationally diverse if they're from perhaps a non-English speaking country. So I had a book about a woman in Puerto Rico. I have definitely read a lot of Junji Ito this year, and I got to say, he did help my stats a lot. So because they're translated from Japanese, I felt like that had an element of diversity to them. And then, of course, also looking at queer diversity or LGBT plus, etc. blanket. And I really enjoy queer horror, so I've actually been purposely looking for it this year. So all that being said, all that right up, I read 43 horror books so far this year, which if someone wants to crunch the numbers, I guess that's less than half of my reading, but still a good amount. Oh, hey, Julie, you popped on. I'm glad you're able to pop by. Oh, and Holly says I'm the queen of horror, horror queen. So I'm glad. Yeah, it means a lot that people kind of value my opinion. So when it came down to it, I found out that I started, my stat goal was a little bit different for this one. I originally said that I wanted to read at least 30% horror books by either queer authors, persons of color, or female authors. And so I realized typically you wouldn't put female in with diversity because at this point in 2019, I don't really consider a book diverse just because as a female author, because in some genres like romance and thrillers, we actually put out more of them. But I do feel like they're underrepresented in the horror genre, or at least underrepresented in the horror marketing. So all that being said, you guys are listening to my my rambles. Thomas says I'm BookTube's horror mom. It's so true. I'm trying to read aloud to him now. So I was reading this horror book about the occult, and I'm trying to figure out at 3 months if he starts to understand anything yet. Because I was reading about devil worship, and I'm like, this is getting weird. And my husband walked in. He's like, what are you doing? It's like, don't judge me. Don't judge me too much. Oh, and I was going to say, that's interesting, Cammie, that you'll be happy when we stop putting queer in diversity. I kind of know what you mean. That is, you just want to get to the point that it's normal, and that we, wouldn't it be just so great that we don't even have to think about it because every book has it? You don't think oh, I want to read 10 books this year with heterosexual relationships. No one has to do that. So I'm definitely there for that because I love reading books that are diverse. Hang on one second. I got to adjust the baby. See, honey, you're doing good. You're doing good for mama. All right. I think I bought myself a little more time. So what I was going to say is that if I look at including horror books that are either, again, kind of queer, persons of color, or including females, I have read 27 books that fall into that category, which is 63% of my reading. So I was pretty proud of myself, even with, again, reading more Stephen King. And definitely when I read indie authors, I find that I do tend to get more by male authors just because even they're the ones reaching out to me and offering me review copies. It's very rare that I find I get contacted by a female indie author, which is unfortunate. So I have to purposely seek them out and be like, hey, is your book on Kindle Unlimited? How can I check this out, etc. if I want to read something like that. But interestingly, what I wanted to do was take out the female representation because I knew that a lot of the books I was picking up were specifically just female horror because it is actually a niche. I do tend to like female-centered horror stories. I'll talk a lot about my channel that some books, Stephen King writes a lot of what I call old man horror, where it's horror books about just some old dude who's washed up and has some weird thing that happens to him. And it's not really a storyline I always connect with. I connect with some of them, but there's some that I won't. And even right now I'm reading Heart-Shaped Box by Joe Hill, which is about a washed up rock star, which I know, Sean, you really like, but unfortunately I'm not loving it right now because I don't really care about an old man rock star because that's just not a narrative that's interesting to me. And I feel that would probably be a narrative that would be, more interesting to a guy. But anyway, so even if I take out the female aspect to this, I thought it was interesting that I still have 17 of my horror books that I would still consider diverse without that aspect, which ends up being, hang on. Yes, I did. Which ends up being around 40% of my reading being diverse, which is 10% more than my goal. So I'm rocking it. So anyway, I am so rambly today. I promised I'd be short in this live show because, again, I didn't know how much time I'd have. But this is actually why I want to do a live show, because I was going to do this as a video, but stat videos I love to watch, but they are so annoying to film because you can tell, like, I'm checking my phone. I'm not someone who memorizes like long amounts of numbers. And so I would have had to like look down and be like, okay. And then, you film your little clip and then you look down, you film a little clip, and then you have to splice it all together. And I just do not have the time or energy to do that right now. So I realized that a live stream would be a lot more forgiving. So hopefully you're all right with that. And my last stat I thought was kind of interesting, and this is a little bit inspired by Rachel from Collinati. I don't think she's watching this, but she put in a goal for herself in the year of a certain amount of money she wanted to spend on books. And I was actually impressed because it was the first time I've ever seen a booktuber actually put a dollar amount to it. I think we've all seen or done the goal of, I want to spend less money on books this year. You hear it all the time. We go on about book hauls, and sorry, I always play with my hair when I talk. But she actually put a number to it. I can't remember the exact one. It's more than, I was able to spend this year. But because I'm on mat leave, I'm really not like making money. Like, I don't I've never gotten a check from like YouTube or anything. I set myself a goal of, I wanted to spend, so how did I phrase it? That I wanted to spend less than $100 on book purchases, including subscription services. So that means that if I get a month of Kindle Unlimited, or if I buy a month of Audible, that had to be included in that. So I kept myself a really tight goal, and I kind of wanted to do it as a challenge to see if I could. I'm very lucky to have an amazing library system. I can order books from anywhere in my province and they will ship to me. So I actually have access to a pretty huge library system, even though I live in a small town, which has the most pitiful library system ever. My actual local library. I love the librarians; they do a great job, but we don't have books in that library. It's so small. But they can order books from anywhere else. So I'm very lucky that way. Keep that in mind. And I'm also incredibly fortunate that I have been able to get more books from publishers. I will say that it's really hard for me to get horror books from publishers. You'll notice I do a lot of reviews of science fiction fantasy books, and that's just because book publishers like Orbit are far kinder to me than any of the major publishers that put out horror books. Some of the small horror presses have started giving me not indie, but digital copies, but even that's kind of been limited and all that. And I've been so frustrated. I don't want to actually name names of publishers on this, but I've had publicists reach out to me. I've requested and said, can I get this front list horror book? Here's all the, I've read their previous books. Here's my reviews. Here's what I've done, And they're like, no, sorry, you don't qualify. And then they will email me back the next day and be like, hey, do you want this YA contemporary romance book? And I'm like, no, I want the horror book. No one comes to my channel going I wonder what romance book Rachel's really into right now. I don't know, maybe you guys can correct me, but I feel like I wouldn't be a good marketer for their book anyway. Even if I liked it, it's ridiculous. So all that being said, I am fortunate to get a lot of review books. I do try to use NetGalley and Edelweiss, if I'm saying that right, as much as possible. But there's still times that I can't get a book, and it's hard. And I'm also someone who tries to buy their favorite books. I'm someone I mentioned who does reread, and I just like to have my favorite books. I like to be able to loan them to friends. And yeah, Cami, you're agreeing. Isn't that crazy? I just don't understand publicists sometimes. So I have totaled it up, and I'm doing really well so far. So of my $100 that I have to spend this year, I have spent $15.22. And I'm really pleased by that. So I've spent $9.50 on 5 used books. I went to a used book sale that happens once a year in my town, and it's amazing. So I will be doing a book haul on that soon. And I also have spent money on 2 Kindle books. They weren't the cheapest. One's a novella, horror novella blankie for the Books in the Freezer July pick, which was $3.73, which seems like a lot to spend on 70 pages, but I haven't thrown any money at Keelan Patrick Burke. So, indie author, I have a lot of respect for him. I think he's one of the best out there. So, not the worst place to spend money. And I also spent $1.99 on a fantasy book, because if it's a really chunky book, I don't always feel like necessarily like sitting down with the physical copy. I have a lot more time actually to read on my phone right now. So it actually kind of made more sense to read it on my phone. And so I was really happy about that. I finally got rid of all of my wedding stuff, which I've been married, I think like 8 years now. Finally getting rid of like my cake cutter stuff. And I tried to sell it, gave it up, and just decided to go to Value Village, or local thrift store. And they had a promotion that when you go and you drop off stuff, they give you a little sticker and says that you can get a book for free. So I went inside and I got a free book. So I will be showing that as well. I've got some good book hauls coming up. So I was really happy. I've been really good at scoring free books. I also ported my Audible account from the American version to the Canadian version. And in doing so, I got a free audiobook as part of their promotion. And then somehow, because they messed up my account and it took like weeks to actually get it ported, they ended up, I think, giving me like 3 credits instead of 1. So I also picked up some more audiobooks for free. And so I've just kind of been like seeing how long I can keep going with this. I do plan on getting a Kindle Unlimited subscription for at least a month this summer, which will eat up some of that because it's like, I think like $10, $11 here. And technically, I have put in a book outlet order, but I negotiated with my husband. Oh, hey, Jamie, thanks for popping in. Everyone's just hearing me ramble. So technically, I did have, some money that I spent there, but I told my husband, basically, I didn't even ask. I just said, I'm buying books for my birthday, and I'm not counting that because it's like birthday money. It's like he would be buying it for me, but he'd buy me the wrong books. So I just put in the order myself. So again, I actually have some book hauls coming up, which is super exciting. Oh, hey, Jason. Thanks for popping in. I think I saw that Steph popped in as well, which is awesome. It's going to say, it's like basically all my friends online. And yes, Stacy, Kindle Unlimited is so good. If you guys have recommendations for Kindle Unlimited books I should be checking out, definitely feel free to put them in the chat. I will be pulling from that later. So those are my 5 goals. I feel like I've actually, I'm right on track. The only one I haven't, technically the percentage goals are, something ongoing. I might switch them to like number goals. Like I said, just because I want to encourage myself to read diversely, not discourage myself from reading other things that I just happen to like. And I mean, I could technically blow my budget for the rest of the year, but I'm doing pretty good so far with that $100. So like I said, I just kind of want to ride it and see how long I can be like the cheapest reader ever and see, oh, thanks, Chad, for popping in. Well, this is awkward because the next thing I was going to talk about was new to me authors. I'm kind of framing this live stream to follow along with there's 2 chats, the 2 tags, I should say, the mid-year freakout tag, and then there's another mid-year something tag. And one of the questions, which I really like, is who are your new to me authors? And now it's really awkward because I swear I was going to do this next, Chad. But I've got to say, I was so impressed by your book, Stirring the Sheets. I totally forgot it's downstairs, so I didn't actually grab it. I gave it, if you didn't notice, if anyone's watching me on Goodreads, 5 stars for the novella Stirring the Sheets. I absolutely recommend it. I do have a review coming. I'm just a little bit backlogged in my editing, so you're probably going to see it in, I'd say, 3-4 weeks. But if you trust my judgment on horror books or just books in general, because it's not like your traditional horror, but just really good book, go check it out. No, Chad, I'm definitely not telling you to leave. I'm just embarrassed. I always find it's the good and the bad thing about working with indie authors is that you realize that there's a good chance they're going to watch your content. And it doesn't change me from being really honest, but it definitely, in the back of your head, you're much more aware. If I review a Stephen King book and I hate it or something, I don't even think about it, because if Stephen King is sitting on YouTube watching my reviews, that would be crazy, and it's not going to happen. I'm glad, Jason. What is he saying? Cami says that Chad is her new favorite of the year. I was gonna say, and that's the thing is I'm really impressed by his, depending on who I'm talking to, books. So I will be checking out more about your books. I'm hoping, like I said, to get that Kindle Unlimited subscription, because I know a few of them are on there. And Cameron Chaney, who I don't think is popping in tonight, but has done a fantastic YouTube video all about Chad Lusky's books. And he was telling me that if I like Stirring the Sheets, I should definitely read, Chad, help me out, Foster and the Flies. Sorry, I'm ruining your book title, but he's heard amazing things about that. So that is one of my new to me, there we go, Of Foster, Homes, and Flies. So I kind of butchered it. Thank you. And so he's definitely on my watch list for the year, because he's always, it's exciting, finding a new author, and especially finding a new author that actually has a decent amount of books out, because I find one author I really like, and it turns out that it's their debut novel, and I'm waiting like 5 years for them to publish something else. Oh, and apparently, yeah, Devin was a big fan of that one, so I will be checking it out. And what I also wanted to mention, I wanted to mention a second author that I just finished reading her short story collection, and that is Damien Angelica Walters. I'm so mad. I've just filmed the review for the short story collection, and I butchered her middle name. I keep saying Angelica instead of Angelica, so I believe it's Damien Angelica Walters. Hopefully that's right. But like I said, I definitely butchered in my video, which is so frustrating because I am way too lazy to refilm. Like, finding quiet time to film when baby is sleeping is too hard to do right now. So I'm just putting like an apology in my description box because that's how I roll. But I just finished her short story collection, which is called Cry Your Way Home, and it's so good. It's a little bit more speculative, so some of the stories are more like dark fantasy or science fiction, but really well done. I think especially like very like female centric. So she's one I want to check out. If people are watching on NetGalley, she has a new book coming out in December called The Dead Girls Club, which might be more on the side of a thriller than straight up horror, but I'm very interested in checking out. And she also has another short story collection I haven't read yet. So those are kind of my two go-to authors if you're looking for that. And oh yes, I just also finished reading Fright into Flight. Sean was mentioning it, that, and I love that short story. It was also featured in the Cry Your Way Home collection, and so good. So I know people have mentioned I'm a little bit backlogged on some of my review content, so I forget that you actually haven't seen me talk about a lot of the Stephen King and a lot of these books that I've read this year. So it is coming. It takes so long to edit those videos. And I kind of just have to like push them through. So in the meantime, hopefully that gives you a chance to, pick something up, and if you don't, like, I'm not trying to push, but like, I do encourage you to like befriend me on Goodreads if you enjoy that, just because then you'll actually get to see what I'm reading at a more timely basis, as opposed to hearing about it a little bit later. For instance, the recent reads that I'm going to be publishing this week on Thursday. I think I actually filmed that in February. So just to give you an idea. Oh, I was going to say, it's really nice to hear that, it sounds like I've had some good reviews. So I really appreciate the feedback. Not that, I don't want to be like patting myself on the back, but I do try, really hard to be, I guess, critical and thoughtful, and hopefully like lean you guys in the right directions. I know I feel like I've grown a little bit as a reviewer, that I used to just be like, I really like this book, or I really don't like this book, and not really be able to describe why that is. Sorry, my feet are falling asleep. I think I'll have to wrap it up fairly soon here, just because Chatty McGee is starting to get really impatient, and I should probably be a good mom and actually go hang out with my child. But I've been basically talking everyone's ear off. So if anyone has like questions, like, do you want to do like a little bit of a Q&A? I'll maybe do like 10 minutes of a Q&A if baby will let me, if that's all right. And hey, I was going to say, I don't know how to say your name, but hey, welcome to the new people here. I'm going to see if he'll sit for me. Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, I'm one of these people, I don't really want to give away too much in this mid-year check-in. Like, I don't actually want to announce like what all my favorite books. Oh, okay. I was just going to, top 3 favorite books of all time, Cami. Well, you really start me out with the easy ones. Thanks a lot. I'd have to look at Goodreads to do like a proper, like, comb through my list. But off the top of my head, like, I have such a soft spot. I typically put, like, if people like press me for like favorite book, I often say like Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. I'm thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid, which, I've talked your ear off. And for a third one, I don't even know. That's a tough one for sure. It's so hard to pick. I almost want to pick, like, I don't know, maybe a science, like maybe the Leviathan. No, it's tough that there's so many books I love, but like, you almost feel like they have to have some deeper connection to call them like an all-time favorite. Like, it'd almost be a second Gillian Flynn book. I almost want to say Gone Girl, because that was the book that got me into reading and actually got me to start a booktube channel. So those are my picks right now. I'm sure I will horribly regret it later and think of like 10 books that I meant to say. So Victor's asking, what Stephen King books are on your radar to read next? Ooh, that's a good one. I will say Salem's Lot, because while I'm not a huge vampire fan, I'm trying to read through his older books and finding those ones I connect with more. So Salem's Lot, also The Shining. I know I haven't read it. I actually haven't seen the movie either. Both of those, I'm waiting on the audiobooks to come through at my library. So it just depends on how quickly they come through. So those are, I think, the two on the top of my list. And I really should try some of his short story collections because everyone keeps recommending them to me and saying they're some of his best. So maybe I think the stories in like Bag of Bones. I know there's a really good short story like The Body. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Quincy wants to know, why do I love horror? And I don't know, because because I've got a black soul, maybe. I feel like everyone always has these like really deep answers where they're like talk about it like being reassuring and comforting and things like that. I just am really fascinated by dark things. I wanted to be a criminologist when I was in high school, and like my mom begged me not to. She was like, "You'll be disturbed and bothered." And I just, yeah, I've always liked dark books. And I've talked about this a bit on the Books in the Freezer podcast, but like I started out reading like mysteries and thrillers, but my problem was that they weren't really dark enough. And eventually I realized that I should get into horror. So I don't know, I don't feel like I have the deepest answer. Let's see. JD is asking, have you ever bought a great book with a horrible cover? Yes. I'm trying to think. I've, yeah. What I'll say, well, it's not a horrible cover, but Perfect Days by Rafael Montez. The hardcover has this adorable pink suitcase on the cover, and it's like this, like body horror thriller book, like delving into like possibly horror. And so it's adorably cute, which is deceptive. And I loved it. And then I was cheap and I bought the the paperback copy, which has like palm trees on it. And so it's not like the ugliest cover, but it's like I should have spent a little bit extra and gotten the book cover that I actually want to show. Whenever I actually like recommend that book on my channel, I actually use a picture copy rather, like I don't even bother going downstairs and picking up my book because I'd rather show people the cute cover. So it's the first time I've ever contemplated going and like rebuying a book, which is something for me. Like for someone who's as cheap as I am, that's a big deal. And so this is such a dark angle. I'll definitely try to get like a better angle if I do this again. So, okay, here we go. Thomas is saying Skeleton Crew has The Mist in it. Okay, I think that's the one. And Victor is suggesting Just After Sunset is another great collection. So yeah, definitely appreciate all of the recommendations. Cammie's recommending Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Okay, that's a must for you. Let's see. Oh, Jason is saying, do you have any rare horror books? No, definitely not. I'm not really good at like any of the like collector type of books. I like they were only rare in the way of like I have some like indie books where there's probably only like, I don't know, 100 copies out in the world or something, because I have a few like really niche ones that have like 2 reviews on Goodreads and one of them is mine. So nothing that much. Oh, hey Coral, I'm glad you popped in. I'm glad you liked Perfect Days too. I didn't say wrong. Oh, let's see. Quincy's saying, do you consider dystopian a subgenre of horror or sci-fi? Oh, that's a good question. We kind of talked about it in a podcast episode. Like dystopian, like I kind of put dystopians in, often they can be like apocalyptic. And I've heard that the difference, they can be, dystopians in my mind can be either. It's more typically sci-fi. Okay, Cameron's saying it's more sci-fi. But like if it has like, yeah, I think if it's more like a larger scale, like typically the dystopian would be more about the society itself than it does fall on the side of like science fiction. Horror is more like you could have perhaps a horror book in a dystopian world, but it would be a much more closed story where you don't really necessarily see the character. Like, I guess, yeah, I'm not explaining this well. If you ever wonder why my videos are so edited, it's because this is what happens live. And this is the good version. Like, oh my goodness, to anyone, thank you so much for anyone who popped on here after watching my terrible first attempt to live stream. My goodness. Okay, and Sean agrees that it kind of depends on the content for me. Okay. And Quincy said that The Handmaid's Tale scared her. That's why I asked. Yeah, I would say like as a book, like I would put that one as dystopian, but like horror is kind of a weird genre because like basically a book is horror if it has horrifying elements in it. And there's so much like overlap. Like, I mean, it's the same way, like, you know, you can have like romance, I feel like is kind of the closest, or comedy is kind of some of the closest subgenres that like you can have like a romantic fantasy or romantic contemporary, and so it has a lot more crossover than other genres, I'd say. Okay, so Cammie's saying, see, this is why we got like people who like actually know what's going on. So she says, it's not horror to me talking about The Handmaid's Tale because even apocalyptic horror, or just in general, so apocalyptic horror isn't about killing each other off for survival. Well, I don't think dystopians are necessarily killing each other off for survival. It's not always the not always necessarily the Hunger Games, but that's fair. So Thomas, who definitely knows a lot more about like science fiction than I do, says dystopias are kind of their own thing. Cautionary tales. I like that. Okay, what horror books would you recommend to someone who loved The Ruins? I'm currently reading it and loving it. Oh, that's a good one. So my go-to, I always pair them together, and most people will. If you like The Ruins, you should also read The Troop by Nick Cutter. I don't know if you've already read that one, but I always put those two together because I think they have similar kind of feels and body horror elements. Beyond that, I would look, I think, if you like survival horror, then, you might also want to look at something like Snow by Ronald Malfi is another one. So it kind of depends on what part you're looking for. Sean agrees. And yeah, he said he knew I was going to say The Troop. Like, I just feel like The Troop, oh, you've already read it. So that's no good. But yeah, I think if it sounds like you enjoy, like, just depends what aspects. If you enjoy survival horror, I would kind of look up that category. If you like body horror, because, I couldn't get through a live stream without mentioning body horror, then I'd possibly recommend, yeah, I don't know, The Troop again. Oh, Quincy asks, you're currently watching Nosferatu. No, I don't have cable. So unless it's on Canadian Netflix, that's all I got. I would love to watch it. So I've heard really good things. Recent best werewolf book. My recent best werewolf book and my recent worst werewolf book are the same one because I think I've only read one, and that is Mongrels by Stephen Graham Jones, which is more of a literary horror book that's almost like reading a vignette of short stories. And I thought it was okay. Like, it was one of these well-written books that I just didn't connect with. So that's my pick there. I'll maybe answer like 2 more questions and I'll wrap it up if anyone can think of something. I appreciate everyone who popped by. Ooh, it looks like Sean's got some recommendations in there, and Cammie also didn't get Mongrel, so you make me feel better. I know Stephanie loved it, so if you're still watching, Stephanie, you're probably like, yeah. Like, don't, I don't need to go on Mongrels. Yeah, I think I'm on board times, so I'm going to. Oh, it sounds like Quincy. Oh, cough, baby. Yeah, I have to go be a good mama now. It sounds like Quincy, you really enjoyed Come Closer, which makes me really happy that you read that one. Oh, recommendations for Michael McDowell fans. That I actually don't have a really good recommendation for, just because it's, as I understand, it's Southern Gothic, which is not really a genre I understand super well because I'm very Canadian. Like, if you want to talk like Canadian winter stories, I'm all there for that. But I don't really even quite understand what makes a book Southern Gothic. Oh, here we go. Cammie's recommending Susan Hill. And I would also, I guess, add in there Beneath by Christina Meester. I believe has elements of Southern horror in it. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. But that would be my pick without really knowing, because I've never actually even gotten to read a Michael McDowell book. I don't know if they're in my library system. And I have not read Library at Mount Char, but I've heard good things about it and mixed things about it. I don't know. Yeah, it's supposed to be just a weird book, which could either be a winner for me or not. Okay, I'm getting, oh, there we go. Yeah, Cammie's giving recommendations. Just like, yeah, like Cammie's got this. I think I forgot my soother. That's why we're in trouble here. I think I better go, like I said, be a good mama. So I'm going to wrap it up. Sorry that I kind of just talked your ear off. I'm glad we got a little bit of time for like a Q&A, just because it's more fun actually talking to people than just having me like ramble on probably. And again, my apologies for the lighting. I actually thought this would be much better. I'm over top of all of our LED lights in like my kitchen dining room. And because it's not middle of the day, it's like super dark here. But I'll see if I can, I think I have a better plan for how I could do setup next time. Like, I probably could actually like film, like do this where I do my normal filming, and that might work a little better. I just was too lazy, honestly, to move the play mat where my son was laying, and like that thing's super portable, so I have no excuse. Thanks so much, everyone. Really appreciate you coming online, and like, if there's any doubt, like, I'm not a big booktuber. Like, if people want to like chat with me, like DM me on Twitter or Goodreads or Goodreads is kind of a hard one sometimes to like get all the messages, but like Instagram, all that. And yeah, thanks again for coming. And like, I really appreciate all you guys. So like, yeah, I love you guys all too. And yeah, I will talk to you guys later. I'll figure out how to end this stream. All right. Bye-bye.